Hello and welcome to the Car Nerd Talks, where today I'm going to be talking about one of the most innovative cars of all time, and that car is, of course, the Citroen DS from 1955. It's one of the most fantastic cars ever made, and we're going to really explore into this today between the history, some fun stories, and all of the technology it has. Don't forget to like and subscribe before we do, because this is going to be a very franche episode of this, and they're not all going to be like that. Some will be better. Citroen's always been a very innovative company going back to 1934, and in 1934 was a bad year for the company. Its founder, André Citroen, he died of stomach cancer, and the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, only to be bought out by the Michelin company, yes, the people who make tires. Now, at the end of 1934, they also released a car that they had been working on for years, the Traction Avante, and this went into production in 1935, but this was a very, very advanced car for its time, and it had three key features that put it way ahead of everything else. The first of which was the fact that this was the first ever production car that was front wheel drive. It was also the first ever production car with four wheel independent suspension, something that the Americans couldn't learn to do for about another 70 years. And it also had a unibody frame, and that's quite strange. A unibody design wasn't a big thing back then. Most cars are like the SUVs now, as in their body on frame. Essentially, the chassis acts like a ladder that you sit the body onto, and this is how a lot of SUVs and pickup trucks are still built to this day, but it makes sense for them but not for cars. So they were way, way, way ahead. Unfortunately, about 4 years after the launch of this car, something struck, and its name was Hitler. So they went through the war, and the French got invaded and absolutely destroyed, and there was no baguettes, let alone anything like a car, of course. Let's edit that out. So during the war, they were focused mainly on just producing armoured trucks, nothing else, because they really couldn't. There was no one to sell to. France was completely occupied. And the reason they were making these armoured trucks is when the Americans came in, they started producing them again to help the Allies. Unfortunately, there was no room for car development in those days, and that was pretty much across the board. Even in America, people weren't developing cars. The big three hadn't produced a car in about 6 years by the end of 1947 or something. So essentially, Citroën focused its attention on armoured vehicles. However, there was a secret backroom project going on from 1937 to 1955. It was an 18-year project to produce the follow-up to the Traction Avante. And at the 1955 Paris Auto Show, the Citroen DS, the follow-up to that car, was finally unveiled. And it was a perfect showcase of French ingenuity at the time, something that the country needed, a boost to show that it was still a powerful country when it came to engineering, arts and prowess. And this car is a sensation. So at the Paris Auto Show, it set a world record. It sold 80,000 deposits in the 10 days, but 12,000 deposits on the first day for this car. That record was not beat until 2016, I believe it was, with the Tesla Model 3 introduction, which garnered 160,000. In terms of looks, this is a car that kind of has to grow on you. It's like that girlfriend we've all had that kind of, she's not great looking, she looks a bit odd, but that makes her unique in a way. And you loved her to bits until Fred came along and ruined it all. And that's why you call her odd now instead of beautiful, because Fred has her. So it looks a lot like that, and it's a very innovative design, and it takes a lot from the aerospace industry. And you have to remember that 1955 was going into the height of the Cold War, so that kind of look was good. Now, the weird lights at the front, so the kind of casing in it, you can actually move your hand in there to open the casing to wash the inside of the lenses, which is still something you can't do on a BMW today. It had a lot of cool, quirky features, like the fenders were covered at the back on the wheels, and the overall design kind of made it look like someone had placed a boat on wheels and then put kind of a roof on it. But it had to be designed to kind of show off the tires as well, which is why we'll get into the hyper pneumatic features that it had afterwards. But essentially Michelin still owned the company, and as such the tire design was a big thing. So showing off the tires, having the kind of hidden fenders at the back, and the fact that, as we'll get onto, you can change this car's tire without a jack, which is pretty cool. But yeah, in terms of looks, quite an odd design, but it doesn't look old today. It kind of looks still a little bit futuristic, a little bit dated, but not much. And I think they did a fantastic job on it. It was designed by a guy called Bertoni and his friend in Citroen, who was Andre Leboeufre or something. I can't pronounce French names, but he was an aerospace engineer, and that probably gives you an idea as to why it looked like it did. One of the most obvious innovations in this car was the hydromatic suspension, and essentially this allowed all four wheels to act independently, but not like just a normal air suspension. It was a mixture of gas and liquid, which meant that it had the liquid for dampers, because you can't compress liquid, but you can compress gas. So the car could run extremely efficiently and had basically a gliding sensation as you drove it. This meant that the car could run on three wheels, because you could essentially lift up one of the back wheels and the car would still self-level itself. It was fully self-leveling suspension. You wouldn't feel anything. And lucky for the president of France at the time that it was, because the car at the time that the French president was in, after he had done something, let's not get into politics, but I can't remember exactly what, but he had done something, and essentially the police, he had given up an island, or given up an African country. What's that African country he'd given up? Doesn't matter. Anyway, he'd given up an African country, given it back to its people, and a lot of French people were very annoyed about this. So a few motorbikes followed him down the highway and they opened fire on the car. 144 bullets pierced the car and all four tires were burst. But because of the self-leveling suspension taking a lot of the strain from the actual rims, the driver was still able to maintain full speed, and the French president vowed never to drive anything else, and he drove a Citroen DS until the day he died. Pretty incredible. Other innovative features too. For example, it was the first car to ever have disc brakes. It had a semi-automatic gearbox, which was quite strange in Europe at the time. It also had something called H on a tree or something. Someone tell me in the comments what this is. It must be a very US thing, because we don't have it in Ireland. It also had a fiberglass body, which is pretty ahead of its time. And one feature that it was very famous for, which is they had the interior headlights. So there was two headlights, the ones on the outside and the inner ones. They were able to turn, and they were hooked up to a cable. So when you turned the wheel, it would actually turn the headlights, so you could essentially see around corners. Now, this was something that Tucker had tried to put in the Tucker 48, which I spoke about here. And that car, they couldn't do it because, so for US imports, the fixed headlights were a thing because of the law, but if you bought the original one, it had the turning headlights with the wheel, which is something seen on the Tucker 48, which you can watch here. And they had to get rid of the ones and put the Cyclops eye in the middle on the Tucker 48 because of the same US law at the time. So that's why that happened there. This car was initially supposed to have a flat six engine similar to a 911 in the back. However, they decided to move the engine to the front and put a four-cylinder instead. So it had a 1911cc four-cylinder wetliner engine, OHCV, with hemispherical combustion chambers. Yes, this car did in fact have a Hemi engine. Hemi! However, this Hemi only had 75 horsepower from the 60 originally derived in the engine. That hemispherical combustion chamber gave it that extra kind of 15 horsepower. The result was this car is absolutely fantastic, one of the most innovative of its time, and that is why it went on to sell 1.45 million cars during its lifetime and is an icon to this day, still being one of the most innovative and advanced cars you can buy. So if you can collect one of these, definitely do. It's fantastic. Drive one, you'll feel self-leveled, unlike this fly that keeps flying around me. Thank you so much for watching today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hope the sound's a little bit better. I still need to configure this thing, so tomorrow's going to be a lot better on that. But thank you again for watching, and don't forget to read on Drive Tribe. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.